Welcome to Master of Science with host Professor James McCanney. The good professor's career spans 50 years as a university teacher, scientist, and engineer. Each week, he will explore the rapidly changing world of science as many long-held theories are crumbling under the weight of new data. He will cover the fields of geology, archaeology, meteorology, oceanography, space science, astronomy, cosmology, biological evolution, virology, energy, mathematics, and more. So please welcome the host of Master of Science, James McCanney.
Good evening, everybody, and tonight we're picking up from some pieces that I missed a couple shows here due to technical issues, other issues, life in a big city. But we're going to be back on schedule now. This is episode 51, and tonight's main science topic, I will be talking about a comet, a very, very interesting comet called the common name is 3I Atlas, but it is C 2025 N1 Atlas is the official designation. So anyway, this object is the third intergalactic loper that has come into our solar system in the last couple of years. So it's on what is known as a hyperbolic orbit. In other words, it comes in and goes out, and it just will never come back. However, it's having potential gravitational influence from both Mars and Jupiter. So there's some interesting things going on here, plus potential electric phenomena that we may be able to observe. Okay, so anyway, that's the main science topic. So just as a summary, I missed the July 8th, 15th, and would be the 22nd of the TV shows The Master of Science with Professor James McCanney. And then 2 days later, the audio from that show airs on WWCR, my long-standing James McCanney Science Hour at the Crossroads. So that audio comes from the TV show, just to catch you up. So those dates would have been July 3rd, July 10th, and 17th and 24th. And okay, so then the radio show was picking up again on the July 31st, Thursday. And we will continue with the weekly programs going forward. Okay. A few quick announcements. The Texas flooding, of course, horrendous flooding in Texas. And I was on a show last week with John B. Wells. He has a show called Caravan to Midnight. A lot of you have probably listened to that show. I was on the last hour, and I think it's a 4-hour show, I'm not sure. But anyway, I was the last hour. It would have been Central Time. It would have been 11 p.m. to midnight Central Time on July 26th. That would have been the show. And anyway, what I talked about there was the manipulation of hurricanes and the technology and the history of hurricane manipulation and disinformation about hurricanes, things to keep you, the public, stupid so you don't understand the collusion with the insurance industry that's been going on. And of course, that was an hour show. So with commercials, what do we have? Maybe 35, 40 minutes max. But if you want to listen to that also, just remember I was on the Coast to Coast AM back in June. I think it was June 23rd with host George Norrie, and I was talking about artificial intelligence and some of the bad things that are going to come out of this. Everybody's like running around, jumping up and down. Oh, AI, it's the wave of the future. We're all going to be AI compliant, No, this is going to be the worst thing ever. It's going to destroy the economy. Okay, so anyway, that was a subject I talked about there. And then also I forget which show early in the this series, this TV series that started on July 2nd, 2024. I talked about artificial intelligence and once again about the bad things that are going to happen because of artificial intelligence. Okay, so yesterday we had a tsunami generated by a large earthquake. 8.9, this estimate keeps going up every time I read about it. The 6th largest earthquake ever detected on planet Earth, so that's big. And of course it was out in the middle of nowhere, so it didn't do a lot of local damage, but it set off 2 volcanoes that were nearby at the Kamchatka Peninsula of Russia, out in the North Pacific Ocean. And of course, I didn't get any end results of the Aleutian Island tsunamis, the results there, but when the tsunamis came into Hawaii and the west coast of the United States, they were relatively mild. And so the earthquake itself was 12 kilometers deep. And so the big tsunamis, the kind that were like in India a number of years ago that wiped out, that went in miles and miles inland. And of course in India, a lot of people live right on the shore, you know, fishing, and the livelihood from the ocean is their way of life. And so they were there and a lot of people were killed. But that was due to a landslide that was in the Krakatoa chain of volcanoes in Indonesia. Okay, and that went across all the way to Madagascar in eastern Africa. A big wave that came in and literally took huge amounts of plant life, stacked it up against a mountain on eastern Madagascar. And that, by the way, is what causes coal. Coal is not formed from years and years of plants growing, fern forests, and then the plants drop and decay and become coal. No. Coal is formed when living plant matter is due to tsunamis. And these are big tsunamis. Some of them are due to landslides or earth-based earthquakes, and some of them, the big ones, are due to large passing comet nuclei, the planetary size, that have come by Earth throughout Earth's history and create mountain building. Anyway, but the earthquake in Russia was 12 miles down. It was a big earthquake, but it did not produce that big a tsunami. And it can be the opposite thing. It could be a relatively mild earthquake, but if there's a lot of land moving involved, such as has happened in the Canary Islands. By the way, excuse me, I have kind of this frog in my throat tonight. Hope I get through the show okay. Okay, so anyway, just a little bit about that. And one thing also that we learned, which I've been trying to make a point to people who should be in charge of this, is that we really have a very poor warning system. The people were listening to the radio, trying to figure out what to do or where to go, like in the Hawaiian Islands. And there's really a very poor reporting system available. And it's, in terms of evacuation, a very crude, just telling people get out of there. You know, people get on the highways and try and get to higher ground. But if there were a major earthquake that created a major tsunami, the west coast of the United States or the east coast of the United States would be in big, big trouble. Okay, so enough of that. Something, the Kamchatka, I always have a hard time with that. Kamchatka Peninsula of Russia is famous. It's part of the Ring of Fire, and so it's famous for earthquakes, volcanoes, and of course we'll see the after effects of a lot of ash going into the atmosphere from those volcanoes. You're probably going to see some orange sunsets for quite a while in the future. But those things can turn around, and for all of you climate change tree huggers out there. I'm a tree hugger myself, so excuse me for talking a little bit out of the side of my mouth regarding climate change, but I've talked about climate change before. It's basically a scientific hoax. But the idea that climate change will change the temperature and we're all going to die and the sea levels are going to rise, this event in Russia, 2 volcanoes going off, negate years and years and years of any warming that might occur, like I say, might occur, due to carbon dioxide. So just understand that. Interesting little story here. Chile, which does not have tornadoes on a normal basis like we do in the United States. The United States has hurricanes, we have tornadoes, but Chile does not. And so anyway, there was a small tornado that went through a small town in Chile on the coast and did some minor damage. But I saw a video of the tornado, and it would be considered a dust devil in the United States. We wouldn't consider that really a full-blown tornado, but for people who are not used to that, and it's never happened before, it's quite a shocking incident. Okay, so let me jump into the topic here on Comet C 2025 N1 Atlas is the official designation. Now, what I'm going to do here is show the orbit, and because this audio also gets taken off and put on podcast platforms without the visual, then I'll try and talk you through this so you understand what's going on. Okay, so I'm going to start talking through this, and just to be clear, this comet was discovered in early July. I think it was the 1st of July this year, 2025, so thus its designation N1 2025. But let me be very clear about something. Astronomers play a funny little game, and that is when it comes to making measurements to describe the size of the comet nucleus. They're claiming it was discovered July 1st. Well, we now have surveys of the entire sky that go back, in many cases, years. And so they could easily follow this back because they have the orbit very clearly defined, and so they could easily go back into other databases of photographs, etc., other databases regarding astronomy, the position of this object in the sky. Number one, and see when it began to develop a coma, which apparently it's not. And anyway, let me describe how astronomers determine size, which this is a bogus method. What they do, they assume that the comet nucleus is a snowball, being white. Okay, and then they measure the amount of sunlight reflecting off of it, and they can tell it's sunlight by its spectrum. If it had a tail material that would be contributing to the light spectrum, then they would be able to see the elements in the tail, oxygen, carbon dioxide, other elements, molecules, and determine that, there's a quantity of material in the coma around the comet nucleus contributing to its brightness. But this comet is not doing that. So at any rate, and also, by the way, it has a sunward spike that it's developed, which there again, they don't like to talk about this because their little explanation of dirty snowballs doesn't work for sunward spikes. And so they're trying to say, it's just outgassing in the sunward direction. But the problem is this comet is coming in at hypervelocity. So to imagine that something at that distance from the sun just coming inside the orbit of Jupiter is somehow ejecting this material in the sunward direction only doesn't hold water. But you see, they're straining to try and explain this based on the dirty snowball comet model, which is, of course, totally incorrect. That's the garbage science they're pounding off on you, the public. Okay, so anyway, this comet is a hyperbolic orbit, which means it's going to come in, it's not going to bend much. It's not going to bend around the sun very much. And it's coming in about a little bit inside its closest approach to the sun is a little bit inside the orbit of Mars. And at this time, Earth is going to be on the other side of the solar system. However, that means that the SOHO cameras are going to have a view of this object as it crosses Mars on the dates of October 2nd. Now it's going to be up above Mars just a little bit, but that's good because now if you look at my logo has a picture of a comet discharging to a planet, and with the jaws of the snake, so to speak, of the discharge, wrapping around, and that's what the ancients tell us they saw when Venus the comet came by Mars, which was a blue planet at the time, and relieved Mars of its ocean and atmosphere, leaving the red hulk of what we see today on Mars. But there again, the scenario that NASA has built that they can't, like that old country western song, "This is my story and I'm sticking to it." NASA has this story that planets formed all at one time 4.5 billion years ago and nothing has happened since. And it's simply incorrect. And what the ancients tell us, why would they make stuff up? Why would they make up that Mars was a blue planet? That wouldn't make any sense at all. They tell us that Mars was a blue planet, just like Earth. So Mars had an atmosphere to hold that water in place, and we see that today. It's just very clear. But they can't let go of this ridiculous idea that Mars had water billions of years ago. No, it's recent. You can see by the erosion on the surface of Mars that this is all very recent. And if nothing more, Mars has tremendous dust storms annually, which would completely obliterate geological features over a very short period of time. So the fact that we can see meandering little riverbeds and washes and water that formed basins and sedimentary rock, etc. I mean, it's just crystal clear proof that Mars had water very recently. And the latest announcement, NASA is trying to inch towards this by saying that, well, the water on Mars now is ice. Well, that's great, but those are in very remote pockets, like at the South Pole, etc. So on October 2nd of this year, this comet will come remarkably close to the planet Mars. And by the way, we'll probably have a good view of this in the SOHO camera, which is something that they have turned off in the past. Now let me explain some of the shenanigans that NASA has played in the past. There was a comet discovered by an astronomer named Gregory Leonard at the University of Arizona a number of years ago. And that comet it was known that it was going to intersect with the planet Venus, come very close. And so, of course, I'm very interested because I want to see how this comet interacts with Venus, which is a comet also. All of the planets are acting as a comet, discharging the solar capacitor. They hit all the data. There were pictures, etc. This is the extent that these astronomers will go to prevent you, the public, from seeing real data about these comets. And so, luckily, the SOHO camera caught this and they didn't realize it. So it got published online showing this comet coming next to Venus and the interaction. Was a very definite, exactly like I predicted. Venus erupted as a comet when this object came by, when this little comet came by. And NASA got caught red-handed, lying, hiding data to protect their pet theories. Okay, another thing that's going on here, and this is hugely important, very, very important, and this is such an alignment that is so perfect. It's almost like somebody planned it, like this was some kind of tour of our solar system. But anyway, Mercury, the little planet Mercury, will be at an inferior conjunction with Mars on exactly that same day, October 2nd, 2025. And so what does that mean? Well, that means that's a trigger mechanism. And we see that Mercury, because it's so close to the sun and it interacts so heavily with the sun electrically, that it actually perturbs Mercury's orbit. That's the reason for the precession of Mercury's orbit, not general relativity. And so, but at any rate, Mercury comes around, and that's like a spark plug. So here we got the comet just above Mars. I mean, spitting close. That's how close these are going to be. And and then little Mercury coming around, which is going to provide that spark. And so I suspect we're going to see a large exaggeration of the comet on this date. And also maybe Mars could potentially go comet. We could see potential effects on the little moons of Mars. Now here, let me get back to this topic of how the astronomers calculate the size of the nucleus. Okay, they assume that because they think it's a dirty snowball, it must be pretty much white. Okay, so now take a white dot. Okay, sunlight is reflecting off that white dot way out there in space, and then knowing the solar constant, the amount of light leaving the sun, you could then determine by the amount of light coming back to us, our telescopes, we could determine the size of that nucleus. But the problem is that comet nuclei are not white. They're black. They're some of the blackest objects ever discovered in outer space. So what's going to happen? A large black object would have to be very large to reflect the same amount of light as a small white object. In fact, our moon, you see it in the night sky, big bright white moon. The surface of the moon is almost black. If you were there, I mean, it's dark gray black is the color of the moon. Yet, because of the light coming off, the sunlight reflecting off of it, it appears to be white. And so that's the same situation with the comet nucleus. However, it's this dichotomy, this bad measurement technique, which they've been using. They lied about the nucleus of Hale-Bopp. Hale-Bopp had a nucleus that was planet size. And that's a whole nother story. I could go into that for a long time. But this comet also will show significant X-ray activity, ultraviolet activity to the sunward side. Is already doing it. The other thing about this comet, well, let me just finish I want to say this first before I forget it. This comet is moving so fast that it has potential to be the Phoenix type of comets. In other words, the shape of the comet is distorted and it looks like a phoenix bird. And so anyway, I've showed pictures of that on this show before, but it just, typically a comet looks kind of like a bulbous glowing halo around a brighter nucleus. But in the phoenix type, where the nuclei are moving very quickly, the head of the comet is kind of squashed down, and then you have these, like, they appear to be wings that are spraying out the side of the comet nucleus. They appear to be a wing, and that material, the tail material, is coming into the comet nucleus. Okay, so anyway, back to the measurement of the size of the nucleus. Now, they could use radio telescopes. Just point one of the radio telescopes up, and they could get a cross-section of this object, because it doesn't depend on reflected solar light. It would just be the reflected signal from the radar and from the radio telescope. Send a signal, watch the beam that comes back, and it'll give you a very accurate measurement of the size. But they don't do that. They use this other bogus method, and they sit there smiling on TV, on their YouTube channel, telling you how they're not sure about the size. They're claiming this nucleus is about 6 kilometers across. But given that the albedo, this is the measurement of reflectivity of the object, They assume it's near 1, and it's probably thousands and thousands of times less because it's pure black. That means the size of the nucleus is thousands and thousands of times bigger than their 6-kilometer estimate. And remember, I told you that when they're taking the spectrum of this object, they can see that it does not have a tail. It doesn't have tail material. It doesn't have hydrogen and oxygen and carbon dioxide and all the things that are typical in a comet tail. It doesn't have them. So what that means is they're just looking at the raw nucleus. And assuming it's white, this little white dot, and compared to the big black nucleus that is actually there, would potentially make this thing 6,000 kilometers in diameter or larger. Okay? And so, anyway, we have this funny business going on in the world of astronomy. And they think nobody notices. Well, I notice, and I'm telling you. Okay, now, this comet passes Mars October 2nd, and potentially this comet will have a big discharge towards Mars, where we could see the effect that I have on my logo. Now, I have that there for a reason, because when you see that, it looks like a snake with the jaws wrapped around the planet, and you find this in archaeological drawings, petroglyphs. You'll find that, in fact, the cover of my book, Planet X Comets and Earth Changes, has such a photo. And there are many other drawings of snakes with a round planet in its jaws, and that's what the ancients saw. Of course, they didn't understand it. This is up in the sky. They had no idea about the atmosphere, or they really didn't understand fire other than they knew how to start it and cook with it. They didn't understand about space science, or that the planets were out there, or what comets were. They had no idea. All they were doing, and that's the strange thing. So to discount these people as making this up is ludicrous. How did they make this up? You know, the Greek mythology, etc., is based completely, and the Mayan mythology, etc., is based completely on what they saw up in the heavens. Venus, the large comet, became the planet Venus. Okay. Now, this comet, C 2025 N1 Atlas, is going to move on and have an encounter with Jupiter in March. So March 3rd of 2026, this comet is going to be on the nose side of Jupiter. And this thing's going to, Jupiter could in fact go comet. Go comet means that it turns into a comet, literally. But there's going to be a big interaction here, a big electrical interaction, and it could start, for example, another red spot. The red spot on Jupiter is a cyclonic storm. Why are there cyclonic storms on Jupiter? It's the discharge of the vertical electric field. It's a hurricane, just like on planet Earth. The only difference, planet Earth has continents. When the hurricane comes around, it shorts out and dissipates. Well, Jupiter doesn't have that, so the great red spot keeps going around and around and around like the ever-ready bunny. And it has since Galileo first looked at Jupiter hundreds of years ago.